Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Unlimited Realities. I am your host, Lisa Zimmer, and I have prepared a fabulous show for you guys today. Really looking forward to talking about it. However, my first guest, who is supposed to be on right now, must have gotten the ET zone confused because he's not on my studio. I'm trying, as I talk to you, to try and get a hold of my second guest to see if I can actually get her going. So I'm going to just kind of chat a little bit as I'm actually multitasking here. Today's show, here we go. We have my first guest. So I'm going to do the intro now. All right, audience, God bless you for your patience, and welcome again to Unlimited Realities. I am your host, Lisa Zimmer, and I do have a fascinating show for you today. We're going to start off speaking with author and filmmaker Paul Jeffrey Davids, who co-wrote with John Selby the book, Blowing America's Mind, a true story of Princeton, CIA mind control, LSD, and Zen. Paul and John wrote about their experiences of taking part in a research project called MK Ultra, conducted by the CIA for military information, where they were given acid, hypnotized, and studied. Fascinating story. True story. Really, really fascinating. Then we're going to go into the second half hour, where we will speak with nutritionist and health coach Terry Cochran, who wrote her second book titled The Wilditarian Diet. And we're going to discuss what this includes and how we can benefit from it. So without any hesitation, I would like to really dive right in with my first guest, because this is just such a cool topic. Paul Jeffrey Davids is my first guest. He has been on the show before. He is both an author and a filmmaker. He has also produced Showtime's Roswell, the UFO cover-up. He's written several books, several documentaries and films. And we're going to talk to him as one of the participants who actually was involved in the MK Ultra research experiment. So without further ado, audience, please welcome my first guest, Paul Jeffrey Davids, co-author of Blowing America's Mind. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, Lisa. Good morning.
How are you?
Good. I know we've both been looking forward to having the chance to talk about the book.
Well, I tell you, as I was gathering notes up and questions to ask you, I realized that this is the first time in my life that I'm actually speaking with somebody intelligently about lysergic acid diethylamide. So it's like, okay, we're going to really go in here and really dig a little deep. So this is just such a cool book, such a cool story. It actually starts off, the book reads as a love story, but in between the love story are all these potent and quite interesting sidelines of really what the true story is. So let me just dive right in with my first question. And, you know, for decades, Paul, I have heard and been aware of rumors that the CIA experimented on college kids with mind-altering drugs, but it was never really, it was kind of hushed over. It was kind of like a conspiracy theory. And so, needless to say, I was a tad blown away to read your book and find out not only was it true, but your connection to this. So can you talk about to the audience what your involvement was and how you got involved in the MK Ultra experiment?
Glad to do that, Lisa. But first I wanted to address your comment about the fact that for so long it seemed like maybe this was just a conspiracy theory. Our book made the front page of the Daily Princetonian newspaper on March 26th, and the article is also online and searchable about Blowing America's Mind. The headline, new book on LSD, CIA blows readers' minds. They gave it a front page story that goes on to take up much of a second page also. And it's very interesting the way the writers for the Daily Princetonian took our book as a challenge to do their own research and see what they could back up about our story, because our story is firsthand, it's personal, it's what happened to us when we were at Princeton, and we willingly volunteered for experiments at the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute near Princeton that we much later found out that these experiments were funded as part of the CIA's mind control research. But Princeton was involved, and the headlines in the late 1970s that disclosed the reality of MKUltra to the world included the information that many Ivy League schools had been involved in the research, and that included Harvard and Columbia and Princeton University. So the writers of the article, and particularly on the online version of the article, because they have links to their own research, and they located the actual letter that the CIA wrote to Princeton University when the projects were exposed, and the CIA's information that Princeton students were part of these experiments. It was actually over a period of about 12 years that they acknowledged. They don't acknowledge all of the financial aspects of it, but researchers were paid, college professors, psychiatrists, doctors at hospitals, prisons. It was a massive program, and they were paid by CIA sort of dummy corporations that were set up to be the paymaster and conceal what the real source of the funding was. So that shows how seriously Princeton University took our book, that they made it front page.
Right.
And in terms of our own involvement, you know, John Selby and I at that time, and we're talking about the late 1960s, we're talking about the era of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and those Beatle years, and Timothy Leary proselytizing LSD across the country. We signed up to be subjects in research we learned about, not knowing the facts about the program, not knowing what their intent and what their goal was and who was really behind it. But we kind of bought the story that they put out there to lure in subjects to make it sound very appealing. You know, you'd be a deep hypnosis subject. Every week it would be a long-term study, some long-term hypnosis sessions. You would lose your inhibitions. It would improve your sex life. It would give you instant nirvana. You know, all of this crap, all of this crap, if you will, to make it sound like to sort of lure people in. And as psychology students, we were really fascinated, and we saw it because we heard that LSD was part of it, in addition to the deep hypnosis. We felt, you know, this would be a safe and sane way to experience this, because we'd be working with doctors, psychiatrists who knew what they were doing, and particularly one really, really famous psychiatrist at that time, Dr. Humphrey Osmond, who was he was the one who invented the term psychedelic. Before Humphrey Osmond came along, these drugs were classed as psychotomimetic, meaning they mimic psychosis. You know, they make you crazy. That was what the label suggested. And that included LSD-25. It included the so-called magic mushrooms, psilocybin, as the active ingredient. And it would include peyote, the active ingredient being mescaline. And Dr. Osmond was famous for his research with particularly peyote, mescaline, with Native Americans, the Native American Church of Canada, in Saskatchewan. He was British. He went to Canada. He did research there. Then he came down to Princeton, and he set up the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute's Bureau of Psychological Research. So we felt comfortable working with Dr. Osmond. It seemed like this was going to be a great privilege. And and you know, I don't want to paint this all in dark tones in any respect, because it was a privilege. It was a fascinating experience, but it developed into more of a dark experience than one for illumination, And the worst parts of it had to do, I think, with the memory erasure that they were experimenting with in hypnosis. They were trying to control your memory. Certainly they controlled memory of the actual hypnosis sessions, and blocked memory until they were ready to let memories back in. The CIA was really interested in finding out if they could successfully engineer a program where retiring CIA agents would be subject to deep hypnosis and have their memory of all classified information completely wiped from their minds.
Wow.
So that was part of it, but that was just one part of an experiment that had many dimensions to it. So our book, which we worked on for over 40 years before releasing, we waited until everybody was dead and we could use the real names.
Right.
And we waited until we were senior citizens and, not afraid for our careers anymore, because we reveal a lot of things in this book, and we wondered how we would rub the feathers of Princeton, the wrong way, maybe. But you see clearly the newspaper took it really seriously and dove right in and really validated all that we had to say here, I think.
Right. It just gives you more credibility because, for the information to come out now and how our government handled it, I mean, today is a different era than then in regard to all kinds of drugs and even talking about it. There's 2 shows on Netflix that actually are based around the MK Ultra experiment, Stranger Things, and then there's Dark, and I find that
Isn't there also Wormwood?
Okay, yeah, I think that's the other one.
Based on the Frank Olson CIA agent, his death, they experimented on him. Okay.
That's right. And there's, these things are coming out at a time when we're kind of more evolved in regard to what drugs and marijuana are. We have 29 states have medical marijuana legalized. We're doing microdosing now with LSD and mushrooms for PTSD and depression. So we're starting to kind of come out of the closet, if you will, in regard to the benefits of what Albert Hofmann started. So it's like you've got this piece that really, needs to be looked at with a different perspective instead of this fear perspective. So, so here we are, 2018. We've got a 40% increase of kids 18 to 25 tripping. So why are they not scared now than maybe my generation in the 80s who were freaked out about doing acid? Why do you think they're more open, this generation of kids, to tripping and expanding or looking at acid from a perspective? Because to me, as a mother of 4, it scares the hell out of me that my kids might be tripping, even though I tripped, 30 years ago. So it's like, I don't want my kids taking something that's like, been, chemically enhanced and God knows what is in there, created versus something that, ignorantly I may have felt safer about many decades ago.
It was one of the reasons why we felt more comfortable in trying this under the auspices of the Bureau of Research at New Jersey Neuropsych, because we knew the drugs would be pure. I mean, Sandoz in those days was making LSD by the millions of doses, at the behest of the CIA. And, Timothy Leary reported widely, had it not been for the CIA's interest in LSD, that psychedelic movement, that era never would have happened. It just, the genie got out of the bottle, let's say. And in those days, at a certain point, there was I don't know whether to call it a propaganda campaign, but there was certainly a scare campaign, with stories released saying, if you take LSD, there's evidence it could alter your chromosomes, you may have deformed children, or,
Right.
some really intense scare stories. And some of the scare stories were